The next part of the joinery process is to cut out the tenon. So this will fit into the mortise. It's a very simple joint to cut out. We're just going to use the tenon saw and we're going to fasten our work in the vise. The first cut I will do is just a cross cut along this line here. And when we cut, so firstly just secure that firm in the vise. We're using our tenon saw, so with the tenon saw, pistol grip, okay, the way you stand, feet are shoulder width apart on roughly a 45-degree angle to where you're cutting. With my left hand, I always rest my left hand, so I'm right-handed, I cut with my right hand. My left hand will generally sit to the waist side of the line, and my thumb, if you can see here, my thumb actually holds the blade in place. You'll also notice that I'm tilting the blade back, okay, and what I will do is just get nice. I won't press down too hard, but what I'm doing is creating a groove. Running the saw backwards because the teeth actually face forwards. So when you push in the cut stroke, that's when you're doing the most amount of cutting. However, if you haven't got an established groove, the saw blade will want to jump around and you're not going to be accurate. So establish a groove first, and that's by running that blade backwards. So just run that backwards a number of times. I still want to be able to see pencil mark from my marking out. However, whilst I want to see pencil mark, I don't want to see timber between the pencil mark and the hole that I've just cut. So now that I'll just take this out, now that I've created a groove, I can start to cut. I'll get that nice and close to the camera, and you can see, you might not be able to see it, pick it up on the camera, but there is the slightest amount of pencil mark there. There's no timber between where my saw cut is. So that's all nice and straight. Okay, checking both sides. So now that I've created the groove, I'm happy with where that is, I can start to do my cut. And what you do, so use the full blade, stop and check frequent intervals. We're only cutting 6.5 mil depth, so you're not cutting too much. So stop and check, and again stop and check. Okay. How I position this is always, so in the vise, nice and low. I'll position this because it's quite easy with the waist side on my right hand side. That way I can always see the line that I'm cutting to. If I have it the other way around and the waist side is on my left hand side of the line, I'm blinded by the blade. Okay? So now we're cutting into end grain. Just be careful here. Just pressing down, dragging that blade through again to establish my groove. Now, if I start pushing too soon, the blade will jump around and it won't cut where I want it to cut. Now I'm happy with that. Let's start the forward stroke. Checking that there's no, I haven't cut my line off. Take that out. You can see my blade, where I've cut with the blade, there's still a tiny bit of pencil on that. We can always, if we have our tenon too wide, we can always pare it back, but if you cut it too thin, you can't make the timber grow back. So stop and check. Make sure you're on track. Stop and check. Make sure that you're holding the blade now level. If you have it on an angle, you may cut too far on one side and not far enough on the other side. front. It's about to come off. I'll just, and that should pop off there. If you have just a little bit of burr in here, we can actually just pop that in the vise, grab your 25mm chisel and just pare that out. Now be careful not to push too far past the back edge of your timber, because you run the risk of breaking the grain out and blowing out the other side of your rail. So that's the first one. Let's turn this around and do the opposite side now.